Saturday, 6:42 p.m. Nestled uncomfortably between the perpetually clogged artery of the noisy highway and the fashionably depraved South Side, the Pro-Well Pharmaceuticals campus stood proudly as a beacon of hope in the sphincter of Pittsburgh. Though the parking lot surrounding the company's buildings was mostly gravel, the corporate headquarters was an immaculate memorial to redemption. 4 stories of pure American dreaming. From several yards away, Marshall Owens hubristically eyed his creation, the only baby that he would ever have. He watched it like a father, a doting one who micromanages his son's every move, who bribes a good girl from church to take his boy's eyes off the wild one with the eyebrow ring and multicolored bracelets that brag of sexual encounters. The kind who would pull more strings than a puppeteer operating a marionette centipede to get the boy into a good school and would never let him spend a night in jail. Marshall Owens looked at the beautiful blonde holding the microphone in front of him. Had things worked out a little differently, he thought, he could have had her. Though the TV news camera caught a face-to-face interview, Owens could see her eyes constantly flicker, moving back to the perfect, unscathed, unburned piece of corporate architecture behind him, and blinking repeatedly as if that millisecond when her eyes were shut would help block out the vision of the scars and skin grafts that covered half of the Pro-Well CEO's face. It has been 15 years since Marshall Owens abandoned his parasitic so-called career as a meth dealer in Fayette County to turn his talents with chemicals to good use, Barbara Goodman said in that semi-nasal tone meant to be heard over a montage of exterior shots. After working on prototypes for 3 years, Owens was finally given a grant to pursue his dream, to cure all that ails mankind. She smiled and addressed the CEO, asking, "And how far have you gotten on that goal?" "Well, Barbara," Owens began, "it's a difficult road. It seems that as soon as we make strides on bird flu, the pigs start getting us sick. It's a perpetual cycle, but at Pro-Well Pharmaceuticals, we work tirelessly every day to find every possible solution to anything that kills, sickens, or just plain bothers mankind. Indeed, we're fighting everything from cancer to female cleft chins." He had to maintain the image of charm, the charisma, not just so that the beautiful blonde evening news anchors would speak to him, but also so that they wouldn't even think to ask what was hidden behind the factory's walls. "There you have it," Goodman said, relieved as she turned towards the camera. "From the monument of strength that is Pro-Well Pharmaceuticals, I'm Barbara Goodman." The cameraman with the ripped black jeans and untrimmed goatee lowered the cumbersome news camera from his shoulder. "So this segment will be on tomorrow night. I'm not exactly sure when, but sometime during our 6 p.m. evening newscast," Goodman said. "I can let you know the exact time once I speak with my producer." "Oh, that's okay," Owens stated, resorting to the endearing assumed personality trait of modesty. "I can never watch myself on TV." "Oh, you don't need to be concerned," she said hurriedly. "We made sure to keep you in the most flattering light to She caught herself, realizing that with all the training she'd undergone to learn how to talk to any subject, on or off the record, she had never received instruction on political correctness when speaking with a burn victim who practically owned the city. Owen smiled understandingly, another positive PR move. "Don't worry about it," he said. "I really should be getting back to work. Morton's toe isn't going to cure itself." He grinned again, a terrible, off-putting, vile grimace that usually evoked too much pity to be associated with evil. "That's just how someone with such severe facial burns smiles," his interlocutors convinced themselves, although joy had never looked so unnatural on anyone. Barbara smiled back at him, glancing above to the purple clouds surrounding the rapidly setting sun. She stuck out her hand to give him a hearty, professional handshake, but he leaned down and kissed it. She trembled as what was left of his lips lightly touched her well-moisturized hand, in the most uncomfortable way to learn that chivalry is not dead. "Thank you so much, Mr. Owens," Freddie Mendez said as he lowered the Channel 13 news camera from his shoulder. "Anytime," Owens said, heading back to the Pro-Well factory, the smile erased from his scarred face. He liked dealing with the press. Controlling the media, jumping in front of any story that may arise, that was part of the job, part of keeping himself out of jail. He reached the large metal door of the factory and quickly swiped the key card that he kept on a zip cord attached to the belt loop of his Versace suit. As he entered the hallway that surrounded the clean production area, Harold was waiting for him, earpiece attached like he was a member of the Secret Service. "Have they been fed?" Owens asked his loyal assistant. "No, sir," Harold said in the baritone of a thug who cultivated the low frequency to add yet another reason for the other inmates to stay away, even when he dropped the soap. "But Sven did pick up their dinner." "From where?" Owens asked. "Downtown. The jail," Harold replied, as they walked down the hallway towards the clean room entrance in a perverse take on the West Wing. "Another hooker?" Owens asked, stopping dead in his tracks. "Yes, sir," Harold said. "I don't care how much fun he likes to have with them beforehand. He has got to vary his locations or I'll take him off delivery detail altogether, Owens said furiously. He'll be in here babysitting if that's how he's going to behave. I'll let him know, sir, Harold said, always welcoming an opportunity to reprimand his Nazi co-worker. Owens started walking again, followed by Harold, who quickly shoved open the door to the employee locker room that was the final barrier between them and the production floor. Harold held the door open while Owens slipped into the room where Sven, the protector of the white race, and Michael, the arsonist, were waiting, holding the flailing arms of a thin young woman. Clad in a tight leather skirt, fishnet stockings, and a top that more resembled a sports bra than a traditional shirt, the woman pulled and kicked and squirmed, but her efforts were overwhelmed by the strength of the two recently released felons, coming off of years of nothing to do but bench presses. Her feet slipping out of her pink patent leather stiletto pumps, she shook and screamed as black mascara tears rolled down her painted face. Owens approached her, assuming the manner of the lean, reasonable gentleman who would never approve of the brutal treatment at the hands of these Neanderthal thugs who'd undoubtedly violated her during the abduction. As Owens came closer, she stopped screaming, her breaths now caught on top of one another, struggling for air. She shivered, making no effort to hide her fear as Barbara Goodman had so sweetly done. Owens smiled as he ran his hand over her greasy cheek. She shuddered. "What are you going to do to me?" she asked, between choked-back tears. "Are you going to—" "Oh, don't worry," Owens cut her off. "Don't look so scared. I wouldn't dream of having sex with you." She breathed a sigh of relief. "Then what do you want from me?" "Nothing," Owens said. "If it was up to me, you'd never have been here." "Then can I go? Please let me go. I won't tell no one," she pleaded. "Unfortunately, that is not up to me," Owens replied. "See, there are others that want something from you." "What do they want?" she asked, unable to control her tears anymore. "You," Owens said. He snapped his fingers, and the ex-cons pulled her around towards the doorway behind them. Harold quickly jumped in front of them and pushed open the door while Sven and Michael dragged the wailing, terrified prostitute, who was attempting to plant her legs to the floor in futile resistance. She had shaken her wavy dark brown hair over her face during her pointless fight, but she managed to peer through her thick tresses at the factory workers. The machines were busy bottling, encapsulating, and compressing, but their attendants were staring at her. They were all wearing hospital scrubs, some even sported hairnets, but they were like no humans she had ever seen before. Their skin was gray, their eyes blank portals of misty purple behind which all hope was lost, and many had developed grotesque lesions that made that man in the suit's burn scars much less shocking. They were all looking at her, with vacuous expressions but obvious excitement as they simultaneously attempted to break free of the chains that shackled their arms to their machines and their legs to the floor. When they tried to move closer to her, the terrified prostitute could hear their rotting yellow teeth clacking, chomping as if they were trying to eat the air. Michael and Sven pulled her farther into the plant, amidst the stainless steel machines and the corpses manning them. She screamed again, beginning to kick and twist, but to no avail. "Help me!" she shouted. "Please, somebody help me!" "It's too late for you," Owens whispered into her ear as he pulled back her dirty hair from behind. "Your parasitic existence feeding off the system will finally be put to use feeding someone else. You're all part of the food chain. See, these folks, they are above you, more useful. Their efforts here, they'll save the world." The hooker screamed again, an aborted attempt at noise that was cut short by her own choked sobs. "I've heard enough," Owen said as he shoved her shoulder blade and she lurched forward, falling to the floor. She scrambled to try to stand up, but it was too late. The two zombies who were supposed to be bottling Owen's gonorrhea had seized one of their rare opportunities for sustenance. They took advantage of the 4 feet of slack their chains afforded and jumped upon the young sex worker who could have so desperately used the pills they were packing. They bit the woman, ripping out large chunks of flesh with their decaying teeth. Had they still been able to think, they would have been surprised that their jaws, which were barely attached, had such strength that they could tear off her cheek in a single bite. They gnawed on her until the prostitute was merely a lump of bloody bones on the floor, while the other zombies looked on with vapid expressions of envy. The 2 corpses raised their heads, fresh blood dripping from their yellowed teeth, awaiting more. Dessert, maybe. Owens glanced down at the ravaged corpse on the white tiled floor and addressed Michael and Sven. "Clean this mess up." "11:30 p.m. To call Hank misanthropic would be an understatement. Hank hated everything. He hated people who used welfare cards to pay for frozen food. He hated white boy thugs who worshipped fictional Al Pacino characters and wore nightgown t-shirts and baggy male capris. He hated those Ugg boots and whatever Star Trek planet they came from. Every bespectacled male journalism student who read The New Yorker and used the word pontificate. He hated those lazy girls who pretend that their unshaven legs are a political statement rather than just a lack of effort. They were often the same girls who engaged in anti-establishment diatribes while in the middle of a swimming pool. He hated the red walls of the mailbox and the techno music screeching out of the archaic jukebox. He hated that no matter how many times he came to this place, they would always forget to freeze a bottle of Jim Beam for him. Shouldn't have been a problem, seeing as he was the only one who ever drank it. He hated that they stocked up on diet soda for the health-conscious clientele. He didn't believe in mixing drinking and dieting. He hated the stool pusher sitting next to him, even though Hank had fucked him last night. The queer, Hank couldn't remember his name, kept smiling at him. It was definitely time to leave. Summer was gone, but it was still unseasonably warm, and there was a deliberate lack of air conditioning in the gay dive to facilitate a clothing-optional environment, leaving his beam warm and unpleasant. But he had to come here. It was the only gay bar in the South Side, and the only one in the city that still allowed smoking. Hank rose from his seat, grabbing his half-full pack of Marlboro Reds from the bar. He threw a crumpled $5 bill on the worn service that had once glittered as much as the fairies in the room, but now appeared to have reached the final stages of syphilis. Shoving the cigarettes into the pocket of his jeans, Hank saw the hopeful eyes of last night's stand on his right. Hank smirked, shook his head, and let out a breath of a laugh. Dude, he thought, I'm not that desperate again. Hank hated just about everything, but he hated himself most of all. Gay? No, that was not something he ever wanted to be. And in his mind, he wasn't. He liked to think of himself as a jail sexual, a prison homo. That's what his life had become. Solitary confinement in his Southside dungeon. Maybe someday he wouldn't want to fuck men anymore, but today was not that day. Now he was settled into this incarcerated existence, dominated by the slave masters at work and the demands of his landlord and the utility companies. If he had the time, he would pursue writing dark, epic poetry and find another band, but he had become addicted to the call of happy hour. He had written several opuses in his head, but had forgotten them by the time he was sober enough to type coherently. He was only 28, but he was already starting to forget all the plans he had made. Pro-Well, where he slaved in anonymity from 9 to 5, had sucked his soul right out of his fingers as they typed inane technical copy for the regional pharmaceutical giant's website. So Hank felt that his bitterness had some justification. Yet he was not nearly as jaded as some of his co-workers. Judy came to mind, a vile specimen who took styling cues from Baby Jane Hudson and veritably hazed new employees. Hank prided himself on his ability to dole out his aggression in deliberate doses to those he deemed worthy of his sardonic rebuke. Politically oriented convenience store employees were a constant target. Judy was angry at time. Hank was angry at potholes, environmentalists, the Twilight Saga, and Chesley Sullenberger. But right now, he directed his rage at Lady Gaga as she bragged about her poker face from the speakers. Whoever played this song had forfeited his right to have ears. Hank was never one for goodbyes, so he departed suddenly, leaving a bar of disappointed men in his wake. Only 2 days off a week, and this is how he spent them. He would have kicked himself in the head, but he was not that flexible. He pushed his stool in close to the bar, as was encouraged here, and walked across the hardwood floor of the mailbox to the exit, which also served as the only entry, in the rear of the members-only club. Shoving the door open, Hank inhaled the putrid, sewage-filled air of the corner of Jane Street and 22nd. It was Saturday night, and he was dreading his imminent crossing of Carson Street. Through the throngs of collegiate sluts and all different colors of trash out for a night of booze-sucking and ass-grabbing, he lit a cigarette and commenced the short, yet mentally arduous journey home. The South Side housed an eclectic crowd, young trendies, octogenarian homeowners too stubborn to leave, although their front steps were always drenched in vomit by the time they left for church on Sunday morning, and tattooed freaks of various musical persuasions. Yet they were all brought together by a mutual need to be in close proximity to enough alcohol to fill the neighboring Monongahela River and light it on fire. It was Mecca for those who knelt down 3 times a day facing the toilet, an area so self-assuredly festive that even the deaf sing karaoke. Indeed, Carson Street held a higher concentration of bars than Bourbon Street, and on any given night, each watering hole, from the glamorous to the grotesque, would house at least one man engaged in an intense conversation with himself. Taking 22nd Street, Hank arrived on Carson and spied the most detestable of all Southside rubbish. The parade of the fuck-o-lanterns, as he called them. The orange-complexioned sorority harlots in tight tops that boasted their unrepentant guts and short skirts that showed off their legs in the few years before cellulite and varicose veins crashed the party. The girls who'd already forgotten more in college than they'd learned. Where was Ted Bundy when you needed him? Hank asked himself. The girls could barely walk in those stilettos, and all 5 of them held little clutch purses. Hank hated those things. He'd carried way too many of those over the years. Karen, Julia, Angie, Jamie, Kayla, the list went on. Holding his girlfriend's purses had never made him feel sensitive or want to watch Project Runway or anything. It just made him feel more like the fag he always knew he was. The fuck-o-lanterns stopped to pay a cover charge at one of the trendy night spots that were popping up all over the area, contaminating Hank's pristine neighborhood, which was once filled only with tattoo parlors, dive bars, and old man hangouts. 24-hour Sam's Diner was still intact, but it was littered with overgrown frat boys, jocks, people who felt an uncontrollable urge to sing Bon Jovi when they were drinking. The weekend warriors. Hank felt this war was waged every day. The food was greasy diner fare, and the waitresses were justifiably angry after being served more obscene pickup lines in an evening than they doled out eggs. As he approached the pathetic neon lights of the diner, a group of jocks stumbled out of the glass doors. "Yeah, I'll fucking kill you," Striped Shirt yelled. Yellow Polo responded, "With what? You've got a butter knife." Hank didn't even care to stop this pollution of his streets. Let them carve each other up with their stolen cutlery, he thought. Survival of the fittest. He tried to walk by and ignore them, though he knew that, even if they were armed with unsharpened flatware stolen from the table, he could have taken either one of them out. He was a 6'2" tattooed gay man who passed most of his time in rock and roll dives. He knew how to fight. He was a bit of an anomaly in a label-craving society, an enigma that no one really understood, but everyone knew not to fuck with. In one of the all-night diner's windows, a big white beard caught his eye. It was barely visible behind a veritable wall of grimy camouflage, green mohawks, dirty spiked collars, and dreadlocks. The gutter punks. They were still here in a seemingly endless summer of love-induced herpes to play one-string guitars and shout profanities at passers-by who didn't honor their cardboard signs stating, "Need money for beer," and "Too ugly to work," giving it one last hurrah before hibernating in a squat for the winter. He hated these transients as much as he hated radio commercials with children's voices. One of the punks was wielding a small stuffed teddy bear clasping a red heart, a leftover from Valentine's Day sales. Hank pushed open the door, and a bell jangled, and he entered the diner. The walls of the all-night hangout had once been white, but were now stained with coffee that had too often been liberated from porcelain prisons by some festive drunks. The place had a 1950s motif, with its confetti-patterned tables and sparkly red booths. Actually, now that Hank thought about it, it was more like a circus. But the animals on display were the customers, all barking and squawking and shoving food into their mouths without engaging in the civilized use of silverware. These creatures were out of control. He watched one particularly arrogant jock with a shaved head, pencil-thin goatee, and barbed wire tattoo deliver an unnecessarily strong ass smack to a waitress, causing her to drop a plate of nachos to the floor. Hank turned away from the mess of refried beans and gloating fraternity swine to concentrate on his original reason for entering this 3-ring advertisement for temperance. He approached the table by the window where 4 bullet-belted dirty junkies were hassling the general. "What are you gonna do, old man? I've got your toys. I'll ransom 'em. Just give us your change and we'll be cool." A dirt-covered, dreadlocked squatter punk in a ragged anti-flag t-shirt demanded over the cacophonous noise of 50 ravenous drunks, waving the teddy bear in front of the general's emaciated Santa Claus visage. "Hey, yeah, okay," the general said in that strange drawl that could only be explained as totally fucking nuts. Even through the thick, bright white beard, his lack of teeth was visible. He reached into his shirt pocket under the snipped pink carnation that he always kept pinned onto his black button-down. The flower was real, replaced on a semi-weekly basis with a fresher plant. The mystery of how he acquired the carnation only added to the enigma of the general, a riddle that no one really wanted to solve. "Don't play their game, General," Hank barked from behind him. The gutter punks looked up at him, their stubble barely visible under the layer of filth that came with sleeping on the sidewalk, a stark contrast to Hank's clean-shaven, Bruce Campbell-caliber chin. "What the fuck do you want?" the green mohawk with the colony of eyebrow rings said through dirty lips and vivid white teeth. "I want you to leave the man alone, or I'll get the off-duty cop that's sitting at the counter to make sure you've got to call your parents up at the country club to come down and post your bail." Hank had struck a nerve. The dreadlocked one threw the Valentine's toy down on the table, and his filthy troops retreated from the general's table to resume their positions with the two pierced hippie girls who looked like prime candidates for Manson family recruitment on the other side of the room. "Go back to your trust funds," Hank shouted to the table. He had nothing but contempt for the spoiled 19-year-olds who lived on the streets while their rich parents pumped money into their bank accounts, and putting them in their place was liberating, a momentary escape from a life that Hank felt was becoming increasingly out of his control. Lately, he'd begun to feel as inconsequential as a teleprompter to a blind man. Protecting the general was a mission to which Hank was deeply committed, even if it was just a way to alleviate the numbness. The elderly homeless man had never used the military to justify his madness. In fact, he had never claimed to have been in the armed forces, but because he sported a general's jacket, he was called the General, for lack of a better name. Mostly he puttered away in anonymity, while the more creative street schizophrenics cultivated bizarre identities. There was the bikini-clad transvestite in the ethnic grocery-filled strip district, along with the mariachi maniac sombrero man in the student ghetto of Oakland, and of course, the lost lady of Lawrenceville with a sunken face, who stalked the artsy districts and streets in a nightgown, searching for, well, no one was really sure what. "Hank, hey, thank you for saving my friends," said the general, holding up his bag of stuffed animals. "They are most grateful." His white hair was cut even shorter than Hank's deep brown crop. An array of glow-in-the-dark, buy-by-the-gross party favors was strewn on the table, and a hot pink straw with an expandable pineapple was sticking out of his coffee mug. The general had been at the creatively named bar, Hank thought, hitting on college girls again, trying to seduce them with stuffed animals. And if the overflowing grocery bag of plush was to be trusted, he hadn't done so well. "Hey, General, let me walk you over to the vet's," Hank said, offering, as he always did, to escort the general to his favorite after-hours dive, the Scottish Vet's, where the old man was safe. He had made it a habit a few years ago to do so, every time he ran into the general, to avoid incidents like this. The general seemed to get his drinking money from disability or Social Security or some other government stipend and rode the buses all night to catch up on sleep. He was a staple of the neighborhood, and added that eccentricity that had drawn Hank to the South Side in the first place. The general had even been arrested a few months back for stalking Mario Lemieux's house to try to give the Penguins owner advice on how to win hockey games. He was a colorful specimen, and Hank wanted to make sure that he stayed local for the entertainment value, and for the opportunity to learn from a man who made his own strange way in life. Hank took the road less traveled to find that it was less traveled for a reason. The road that most people chose was a superhighway, complete with the flying cars that we'd been promised since the 60s. But Hank's road was made of cobblestone, and it had a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit and some angry geriatric in golf pants with a radar gun yelling, "You're going too fast." It was a one-way street that ended in a cul-de-sac where dreams went to slit their wrists. I've got to get... "Where's the sexy young lady who was talking to me?" the general asked, his mad eyes searching the room. "The waitress? I'll find her." Hank headed towards the cash register, through the throng of sweaty young women, hungry after a night of dancing. Hank hated the dance clubs. To him, they were the most egregious offense to the South Side, aside from the Cheesecake Factory, that haven for suburban parents to escape their Adderall-addled kids. He heard the weird voice behind him, and when he turned back to the table, he saw the general waving a pink stuffed rabbit with "I love you" embroidered on its chest. "Hank, you're a very good man. You give this to your girlfriend." "11:49 p.m. The members of the zombie chain gang did not have the same musical abilities as their enslaved predecessors. They expressed their melancholy in a chorus of groans and gurgles with all the enthusiasm of Eddie Vedder singing the list of side effects on the drugs the zombies were producing. Shackled to the stainless steel machinery of the Pro-Well Pharmaceutical plant, the slaves worked diligently, loading funnels with powder that would subsequently be compressed into pill form or loaded into capsules. The pristine white walls of the plant made even cannibal corpses seem monotonous, as they robotically repeated their actions day after flesh-hungry day. They sang the zombie blues, and it was a terrible song. The chariot was swinging very low, but none of the zombies had a home to be carried to. They were vagrants, hobos, crazies, drug-addicted dregs, the forgotten residents of the city's irritable bowels. Some of the more confused derelicts had thought that a band of angels had already come for them when they were swept off the streets and into the clean white rooms of the Pro-Well Pharmaceutical plant. It wasn't heaven, but after the injection killed their minds and left them only as semi-functional shells of what they once were, it wasn't hell either. Even if the afterlife for the damned was on fire, as so many sources suggest, it wouldn't matter because a zombie cannot feel any pain. Indeed, several had failed to notice when a limb was torn off after being stuck in one of the dangerous industrial devices, like a door. What this place was purgatory, a state of limbo between life and death, with a bit of ravenous cannibalism thrown in for entertainment. So they couldn't mourn, they couldn't grieve, and they certainly could not sing. Instead, they came up with a chorus of monotonous groaning that, layered atop a soft hum of the stainless steel machines, was not unlike the buzz of a Vuvuzela philharmonic. And it was eerily reminiscent of the solemn hymns sung by the choir in the church that the guard on duty, Stan, had once presided over. Stan was growing accustomed to the sight of the ravaged, dead human flesh sporting hospital scrubs manning millions of dollars worth of bottling, packaging, and encapsulating equipment. During his years in the seminary, he'd fancied himself as a Mother Teresa figure, helping lepers all over the world. He planned to teach them to embrace their conditions, to accept Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior, and to go on the inevitable reality competition in which the acolytes were all tempted by their former vices. He didn't think he'd have that much luck with the workers. Though they were technically dead, they were still moving, still working, without a pulse or a heartbeat, or a single brainwave except for the impulse to feed. And that was the part that truly bothered Stan. Though the lepers could leave a trail of body parts in the sand, the others would not pick them up for dinner. But monitoring the zombies had really helped him keep the vow of chastity he's resworn after the indictment. Stan paced through the factory, careful to keep in the exact center of the rows between the lines of machines. In a matter that seemed as routine and predictable as their work, the zombies turned one by one to Stan, growling and flailing and biting the air as he passed. But chained to their machines, the famished, sort of dead hobos were unable to satisfy their hunger for the pederast priest. And as soon as he was far enough away that the few feet of slack in their chains afforded them could not put them in striking distance, they returned to their tasks. So they continued their wordless chant. They weren't asking for wages, benefits, approved overtime, vacation days, just food. Even if they had the brain power to organize a strike, management could have easily swept up some new desperate vagrants and turned them into scabs with the prick of a hypodermic needle.